October 15th, and we're going to have a presentation tonight as a continuation of last Thursday's part two of how we filter our reality. And tonight we're going to look at games and scripts. Last session, we looked at something called icons, and that we could develop an icon or a very important entity in our childhood or in our adult. But it's the ones in our childhood that we tend to have had very high repetitive exposure to. We played with or dreamt about or read about or watched this particular entity. It became a bonded with it. And then we forgot about it and we became adults. And this icon could still be playing around in our subconscious, setting our expectations and limitations. So becoming aware of what icons may still be in our past is important. Then we looked at meta programs, which are self-regulating patterns and strategies of behavior that, again, are mainly for survival because we need to be able to react quickly to things around us. But when these run unconsciously in our subconscious, then they can create some issues, and it's important to be aware of them. The 2 points that we stressed last week was the fact that these meta programs are a continuum or a spectrum of behavior. You can be anywhere you want to be on these various continuum. The key here is that they tend to run unconscious. However, you have the ability to observe yourself and become aware of where you are in these various meta programs. And we looked at some questionnaires, and there's lots of people doing different things with meta programs, and I don't really subscribe to any of them. I think the idea of meta programs in themselves are valuable information, but these applications can be useful in learning more about them. Bottom line is we looked at the internal map of reality in terms of level 1 modeling, where you would emulate an icon or a person or a system. And level 2 modeling, again, it's a little bit more involved. It's called transmission. So we're going to look at reality in terms of how we can use this knowledge to be closed when we want to be closed, and be very associated, be very much sensing what the information is, a sensor and a judger, or to be very open and dissociated and more intuitive and more of a perceiver, to be able to go back and forth along this range. So that's the key. So tonight we're going to focus on transactional analysis material, almost exclusively, but I'll bring in some other material. And you can just look up transactional analysis, search it up, or generally known as TA. But before we do that, I thought I would give you just a quick idea about me and where my key influences come from. And I guess the key beginning for me was my parents, and they were social change agents, and they were very successful at it. And they received multiple honorary degrees. My father received the Order of Canada for his ability to change social values. And then later on, I worked with the Nova Scotia Youth Arts Agency. Actually, I was part of the creation of it and left before it ended. But the key here is that this agency's main objective was to develop innovative ways of working with creative processing. And then later, I had the good fortune of working with a Taoist monk for many years, studying meditation and Qigong, learning how these aspects of the mind, body, and spirit work together to achieve things. And then over the last 10 years, 15 years, I've been studying the internal map of reality. There's a lot of information coming out of the Centerpoint Research Institute, so I've gotten a lot of information there. And the internal map of reality, for me, kind of ties all of my history together in a nice model. Okay, so let's look at the internal map of reality one more time. And this self-regulating cybernetic loop runs fantastic when it's left alone. And you might ask the question, if it's self-regulating, who is doing the regulating? Well, it's kind of magical. Uh, Not really, but it looks that way or feels that way because everything is interactive. So once you set your values up and they're lined up in the proper priorities, call it a hierarchy, you begin to develop beliefs about how you're going to satisfy those values. And like magic, you'll start getting motivated for different mental states and different behaviors. Now, things won't just pop. You won't receive $1 million check in the mail. What it will mean is that you'll have to do a lot of work. You have to be prepared. If you set your values and start developing beliefs, you then have to be prepared to do the work. So there's a lot of work involved here. And then after you have your activities, you then observe the results, and the outcomes are crunched back up in terms of what you think worked or didn't work. So, bottom line is that you're out there interacting with people, and your cybernetic loop is out there interacting with people, and there's only three possible outcomes when you interact with another individual. From that interaction, you both might walk away with smiles and feel okay, or one of you, you or the other person, one of you may not be okay. You walk away feeling not okay. And I guess the worst of the three options is that you both feel not okay. So we're going to look at this and how it ties into some other things. Here's an example of a game that people might play with others. There's three different states here. A person could be in a victim role, needing help, and someone else could be the rescuer to come in and to save them and to, whatever it might be. However, there's this role, call it the persecutor, who might persecute rescuers and saying they're being Pollyannas and trying to save the world and, don't help anybody. Or the persecutor might persecute the victim and saying, you are the cause of your own situation and I'm not going to help you. You get up out of your feet, you brush yourself off and get on. So these three different roles, and the key here is that these tend to be situations where nobody's happy. The victim isn't happy, and quite often the rescuer in these situations ends up rescuing all the time, and you get this frustrated state where you've helped this person out innumerable times, and you begin to get burnout. So the rescuer isn't always happy, and quite often, I believe. Persecutors, well, they're just plainly upset at the whole situation. So nobody's happy in this game. However, somebody's getting something out of it. And if you look at the ego states that are described in transactional analysis, the one that creates the most balance and neutralizes games like the victim triangle game is just staying in the adult and treating others as an adult. And you get this very open and honest communication. When you start mixing up the ego states and when the parent and child ego states, which can be rather disruptive and can cause problems, you can see that the victim is acting like a child and the rescuer and persecutor are acting like parents. None of them are acting like adults. So the key here is to stay in the adult mode. That will neutralize that game. Let's look at something else here. I call it scripts, and you can have lifelong scripts. Most people do, and these scripts tend to have a similar repetitive outcome. And you can look at your own life and maybe some of your friends, and you'll notice that they seem to have a similar, every time they get a job, it seems to end in a similar kind of way, or every relationship they have seems to end in the same kind of problem. And there's this repetitive pattern that you might notice with yourself and others. It's because you're running a script, you're running a story. And realizing that you are running a story is huge because then you can change the story or choose not to run that story. I find it interesting that some scripts are very short, like that victim triangle game, which is a version of a script. They tend to be very short, days, a day, within a day. Someone can flip from being the victim to a persecutor, within minutes. But these longer cycles where there's a victim, persecutor, rescuer cycle, these longer ones can be quite hard to detect. So, what are some of the components of a script? One component is the inner child, and any of you that are interested in looking at the subject of the inner child might want to check out John Bradshaw, who was one of the first people to start discussing, presenting, and talking about the impact of not knowing your inner child. And that brings us up to the idea of icons and meta programs. These icons can be very powerful. Just tuning into some of the experiences you had as a child, and you can use timeline to help neutralize some of this. You tend to find that people have built an identity, an icon. Another possible area that you could look into neutralize scripts is your values hierarchy. Very, very important. Once you have identified what's of value to you, you'll automatically resort your beliefs, and then out of that you'll get new outcomes. So your internal map of reality is the key. Now, here's something I'd like to introduce to you. That we've been talking about icons and talking about scripts and meta programs, and all that stuff is quite nice and interesting. However, there's another route. And all of this when you're looking at this internal map of reality, all of this is really the mind. And through meditation and self reflection, you have the option of just stepping right out of it. So there are two options here. You can work with the internal map of reality, clean it up, and do your best to get it working more naturally, removing any external influences that may be disrupting it. Or you can just step right out of it. Because the internal map of reality is just a concept of you. It's conceptualization. So you can just get up and choose not to guide your life by your map. Yes, this takes more work. Yes, this takes more awareness. But one of the ultimate goals of doing meditation and doing this kind of work is that you will be less and less bound by your subconscious and unconscious training and beliefs. So you got two options. You can work with the values, study it, understand the belief systems and how they work, observe your mental states and behaviors, and use that feedback to improve your life. And that's very beneficial. And the other option is you can choose to just step right out of the internal map and discover the world based on pure consequence and your responsibility as an individual. Well, that's pretty much it for this series of presentations. In the following sessions, what we will do is we'll do some group processing, kind of book 2 stuff. But again, I enjoy having this opportunity to just present it and have discussions about it. So again, thank you and have a great evening.